She was a 67-year-old widow, just driving home after a scholarship gala, until the flashing lights pulled her into a moment that would shake a city. What the officer didn't know? He wasn't just stopping a black woman. He was stopping the mother of the state attorney and starting a reckoning she didn't need to shout to lead. If you believe dignity doesn't need a title, hit subscribe. This is Evelyn Grant's story, and you need to hear it. It was just after 9:45 p.m. when the streetlights began casting long golden shadows across the tree-lined boulevards of Hyde Park, one of Chicago's oldest and most storied neighborhoods. The city was winding down for the night. You could still hear the faint hum of jazz spilling out from a local bistro, mixed with the hush of Lake Michigan just a few blocks away. The night had that particular kind of stillness, the kind that feels earned after a long day. Mrs. Evelyn Grant, 67 years old, sat behind the wheel of a dark blue 2021 Lincoln Continental. She wasn't in a rush. She never was. Not anymore. Her hands, graceful yet worn with years of work and wisdom, rested gently on the steering wheel. Her silver curls were neatly tucked beneath a soft wool beret, and her navy trench coat was buttoned up to the collar despite the lingering summer warmth. Beside her on the passenger seat sat a neatly folded program from the Legacy Scholarship Gala she had just left, an event held in honor of her late husband, Charles Grant, who had once been a beloved professor and civil rights advocate at the University of Chicago. To most onlookers, Evelyn was just another black woman driving home late at night. But those who knew her, really knew her, understood she was more than that. She was history in motion, a retired educator, a widow, a pillar of the community, and most notably, the mother of Chicago's youngest and most powerful state attorney, Julian Grant. But Evelyn wasn't thinking about any of that. Not tonight. Her thoughts were quieter, softer. She was remembering how Charles used to hum old Nina Simone melodies as they drove these same streets after long faculty dinners. She missed him more than usual this evening. The gala had brought back too many memories. As she turned onto South Dorchester Avenue, Evelyn noticed the headlights in her rearview mirror. A black and white patrol SUV, unmarked except for the faint reflective CPD badge on the side. She didn't think much of it at first. Chicago cops patrolled Hyde Park often. It was one of the few neighborhoods where residents expected their presence and occasionally even appreciated it. But then the cruiser stayed behind her, turn for turn, block for block. She exhaled slowly and reminded herself not to assume. "Don't make it a thing," she whispered. "Just keep driving." She signaled and made a right. The SUV followed. She turned again, this time down a better-lit street, still behind her. Her fingers tightened slightly around the wheel. This wasn't fear. Evelyn had grown up marching in the streets during the tail end of the civil rights movement. She'd stood between police batons and protest lines more than once. But what she felt now wasn't fear. It was disappointment. That even now, at her age, in her own city, wearing pearls and driving a luxury car, she was still just a silhouette to some. Still just a profile. Suddenly, red and blue lights flashed in her mirror. A brief siren chirped once, sharp and commanding. Evelyn pulled over slowly, her movements calm and deliberate. She parked neatly under a flickering lamppost, put the car in park, turned on the interior light, and placed both hands firmly on the steering wheel. She waited. The officer approached the driver's side window. Tall, white, mid-30s, buzz cut, square jaw. His name tag read Officer Brenner. And from the scowl already forming on his face, Evelyn knew how this interaction was going to go. "License and registration," he said curtly, skipping all formalities. Evelyn nodded once and gestured to the items already visible in her leather pouch on the dashboard. "They're right there, officer." Brenner didn't reach for them right away. Instead, his flashlight flicked across the inside of the car, stopping for an extra moment on her purse, her jewelry, then her face. "Where you headed this late?" Evelyn met his eyes. Calm. "Just left an event. Going home. I live nearby." "What kind of event?" His tone wasn't curious. It was testing. "A gala. For educational scholarships. I'm on the board." Brenner raised a brow. "Out-of-state plates. You visiting?" Evelyn shook her head slightly. "Bought the car in Michigan last month. My son helped me pick it out. He's a prosecutor." There was a small pause. Something flickered behind the officer's eyes, a mix of skepticism and superiority. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," he said, hand moving subtly toward his belt. Evelyn blinked. "On what grounds?" "Your tags don't match the address listed on your license. Could be a registration issue. Step out, ma'am." It wasn't a request. Evelyn's spine straightened in her seat. "I'm not refusing, officer. I'd simply like to understand why this is escalating. I haven't been told what violation I committed." "That's obstruction," he snapped. In the shadows across the street, a man walking his dog stopped and watched. A rideshare driver parked nearby reached for his phone. Somewhere, someone began recording. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "I'm stepping out," she said quietly. As she opened the door, the air felt colder, the tension thicker. She placed one hand on her car door and the other where he could see it. She had lived too long and seen too much not to know how quickly these things could spiral. But she still didn't flinch. She stood there, under that flickering lamp, poised and elegant, dignified, silent. The officer moved closer, eyeing her like he was still trying to decide whether she was trouble or simply inconvenient. That's when his radio buzzed. A faint voice. "Unit 12. Confirmed name of suspect. Dispatch running cross-check now. Over." Brenner pressed the mic. "Grant. Evelyn. EVE." The voice on the other end cut in sharply. "Hold position. Repeat. Hold. That's Evelyn Grant. Confirmed. Do not detain." There was silence. Then, "She's the state attorney's mother." "Repeat. This is the mother of State Attorney Julian Grant." Brenner froze. And Evelyn? She didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply looked him in the eye and said, with the kind of calm that only comes from a lifetime of being underestimated, "Now, may I go home, officer?" The air changed. And just like that, the first domino began to fall. The night hadn't changed in Hyde Park. Still cool, still silent. But the energy at the side of South Dorchester Avenue had shifted entirely. Officer Brenner stood there, his posture rigid, fingers hovering inches from his radio, face flushed with the slow, creeping burn of embarrassment. He'd just realized the magnitude of his mistake. And Evelyn Grant hadn't moved an inch. She stood outside her vehicle, back straight, her hands at her sides, not because she needed to defend herself, but because she knew how these things worked. Posture, in situations like this, was more than physical. It was power. It was presence. It was a kind of silent protest. Officer Brenner cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you're free to go." But Evelyn didn't reach for her door handle just yet. She simply raised an eyebrow, cool and composed. "No citation? No explanation for the stop?" He avoided her gaze. Your vehicle matched a description from a BOLO earlier, he mumbled. She didn't buy it. Is that what you're going with? He didn't answer. From across the street, the ride-share driver who'd been filming kept his camera steady. His TikTok was already uploading a clip titled, "Chicago PD pulls over state attorney's mom. Watch what happens next." And that was just the beginning. Across town, Julian Grant, Chicago's youngest ever elected state attorney, was still in his office at City Hall, a floor-to-ceiling window framing the city skyline behind him. He wasn't new to late nights. Reform didn't run on a schedule. His inbox was stacked with unread case files, police union complaints, and oversight board appeals. He was halfway through drafting a proposal for an independent audit of city precincts when his phone lit up. Unknown number. Caller ID, dispatch, CPD internal. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Grant, this is Watch Commander Flores at the 3rd District. We've had a situation tonight involving a Miss Evelyn Grant, your mother." Julian sat upright. "What happened?" "There was a stop. Officer initiated a pullover. It was mishandled. She's unharmed, but there was an escalation. She wasn't cited or arrested, but the officer didn't recognize her at the time." Julian exhaled. Slow. Measured. "Send me the dash cam and body cam footage. Now every angle. I want to see it all before the sun comes up." "Yes, sir." "Understood." Julian hung up and stared at the phone for a long moment. Not because he was surprised, but because he was furious in the quiet, still way only a son watching his mother be disrespected can understand. This wasn't just about Evelyn anymore. It was about every mother who didn't have a son in office, every elder who couldn't name-drop protection, every citizen pulled over because of the color of their skin and not the content of their record. He opened a new file. Subject line, Protocol Breach Review, Priority 1. Memo. Tonight, my mother was treated like a suspect 2 blocks from her own home. If this can happen to her, it can happen to anyone. Let's not wait for outrage. Let's act now. He hit send, ... Back on Dorchester Avenue, Evelyn finally stepped back into her car. The officer, now pale and still, lingered near the curb, watching as she calmly fastened her seatbelt, adjusted her mirror, and restarted the engine. She didn't thank him. Why would she? As she rolled away from the flashing lights, the only thing echoing in the back of her mind was Charles's voice, her late husband, soft and steady like always. Dignity isn't a gift. It's a stance. She kept that stance all the way home. By the time Evelyn pulled into her driveway, a second wave had already begun online. Hashtags like #, Mama Grant, and #, Hyde Park Stop began trending. The original video from the rideshare driver had already hit 18,000 views. Comments flooded in. "She's got more class in her silence than that officer has in his entire career. How many mothers don't get to drive away? Why does it always take power to prove worth?" People were talking, and more importantly, they were watching. That same night, Officer Brenner sat in his cruiser in a grocery store parking lot, hands on the wheel, face lit only by the screen of his patrol laptop. The call from dispatch hadn't just shocked him. It had embarrassed him, humiliated him. State attorney's mother. He'd made a career of following procedure, but that wasn't what tonight had been. Not really. His instinct hadn't been based on law or protocol. It had been based on profile. And now, the fallout was coming. By morning, Evelyn's phone had 27 missed calls. not just from family and neighbors, but from journalists, activists, ministers, and strangers. Julian arrived at her doorstep before sunrise. She opened the door still in her robe, tea steeping on the counter behind her. He stepped forward and wrapped her in a hug so tight she had to gently pat his back to release him. "I'm fine," she said softly. Julian stepped back, eyes glossed. "You shouldn't have to be fine." She gave him a knowing look. "Don't fight a fire with fury, baby. Fight it with truth." Julian nodded. "Then let's show them the truth." They sat at her kitchen table, the city outside beginning to stir, while Julian laid out a strategy not just for response, but for revolution. He wasn't just going to release a statement. He was going to launch a citywide review of all police stops in majority black neighborhoods over the last 5 years. He was going to call a press conference. He was going to demand accountability. And this time, the system would listen. Because this wasn't just about posture or protocol anymore. This was about power. And who finally held it? At exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, Chicago woke up to something it hadn't expected. A headline splashed across major news outlets that didn't mention sports scores or budget cuts. It read, "State Attorney's mother pulled over without cause in Hyde Park. CPD under fire." Below it was a freeze frame. Evelyn Grant, standing beside her silver Lincoln sedan, expression unbothered but commanding. The kind of photo that doesn't just spark curiosity, it ignites action. But inside her modest Southside home, Evelyn's morning was just as it had always been. Calm, measured, steeped in ritual. She brewed her tea, green jasmine, laid out her newspaper, and opened the window to let in the crisp October air. She wasn't a woman who rushed. Even now, when the city was buzzing with outrage on her behalf, she folded her morning in slow, deliberate layers. Because she part understood something most people missed in chaos. Nothing powerful happens in panic. Meanwhile, Julian Grant, now at the center of a media firestorm, sat in a conference room on the 19th floor of City Hall. Around him, a team of legal advisors, policy directors, and communication staff buzzed like bees in a hive that had just been kicked. "We're getting dozens of calls," his chief of staff said. "Civil rights orgs want statements. News anchors want interviews. And the governor's office just asked if we're escalating." Julian didn't flinch. "We're not escalating," he said. "We're preparing." Because he knew. The reckoning wasn't just coming. It was already in motion. By noon, protests had begun to form. Not in the usual hotspots of downtown, but right in Hyde Park. Community members gathered at the corner where Evelyn had been pulled over, candles in hand, signs in arms. Dignity shouldn't require recognition. Respect is a right, not a privilege. Justice for every mother, not just the mayor's. There were no chants, no marches, just silence. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than sound ever could. A local radio station aired a live roundtable. The moderator, a black woman in her 40s named Candace Hill, opened with a simple but cutting question. Why does it still take a title, a connection, a last name, to earn basic respect? The lines lit up instantly. Inside the 3rd District Precinct, Officer Brenner had been pulled from active duty. He sat in a private conference room with an internal affairs investigator, voice recorder between them, his badge and sidearm sealed in a clear plastic bag beside him. "Walk us through what made you initiate the stop," the investigator said. Brenner squirmed. "Vehicle matched the description," he offered. "What description?" the man asked calmly. Brenner opened his mouth, then paused. He had none. No call-in, no BOLO, no confirmed lookout. He had just decided, and now the system he once trusted to cover his tracks was peeling him back, layer by layer. Back at Evelyn's home, she was visited by an unexpected guest, Reverend Martin Calhoun, a lifelong family friend and local civil rights leader. He stepped into her living room like he'd done 100 times before, holding a small potted lily in both hands. "For strength," he said, handing it over. Evelyn smiled faintly. "You know I don't believe in symbolism." "But you do believe in roots," he replied, "and this one's got plenty." They sat together, side by side, looking out the front window at the quiet row of homes. "What are you going to do next?" he asked. Evelyn sipped her tea. "Let Julian do what he was raised to do." "And you?" "I'm going to watch this city find out what it means when the wrong woman gets targeted." Calhoun nodded. "I've seen that story before." "Not like this," she said softly. "Not when a generation is watching." Meanwhile, Julian made his move. He stood behind a podium at the Harold Washington Cultural Center, flanked by city officials and community leaders, his mother watching from the front row in a navy blue coat and pearl earrings. "There's no easy way to say this," he began, voice steady. "Last night, my mother, Evelyn Grant, was pulled over without cause. She was profiled. She was questioned. She was disrespected. And she handled it with more grace than that situation ever deserved." The room fell into pin-drop silence. "But this isn't just about my mother. It's about your mother, your aunt, your grandmother, every black woman who's ever had to calculate safety before a conversation." He stepped forward slightly. "Today, we're launching a citywide audit of discretionary traffic stops, beginning with South Side districts. We're implementing mandatory bias and de-escalation training for every precinct. And we're forming a civilian oversight board with real authority, not a rubber stamp." Applause erupted. Julian didn't smile. Not yet. He looked directly into the cameras. "And to the officers who believe power is a posture, not a responsibility, this city is watching, and we will not blink." That night, Evelyn received a letter slipped through her mail slot. It was unsigned. "I was the girl across the street. I watched what happened. And for the first time, I saw someone stand without shouting. Thank you." She folded the note, tucked it into her Bible, and whispered to herself, "Still working." In the days that followed, change rippled, not with chaos, but with precision. More testimonies surfaced. A former teacher, a delivery driver, a nurse, all describing similar encounters with Officer Brenner. He had a pattern. Now, he had a spotlight. And Evelyn? She didn't speak often, but when she did, people listened. Because sometimes, power doesn't wear a badge. It walks in grace. It knows its worth. And it waits, silently, as the reckoning approaches. Not in fury, but in purpose. The silence didn't end with a shout. It ended with a name, spoken in a tone that wasn't angry, but exacting. Evelyn Grant. It echoed through the city council chambers like a bell, steady and undeniable. The room, packed shoulder to shoulder, went still as Evelyn stepped up to the microphone. She didn't look like a firebrand. She didn't wave signs. She didn't raise her voice. But what she carried, in presence, in legacy, in poise, was heavier than any protest ever could be. She adjusted the mic once, briefly, then spoke. "I am not here today to ask for justice. I am here to remind you what it looks like." No one dared interrupt. "I raised 3 children in this city. I buried a husband here. I paid taxes here. I've attended school board meetings, church fish fries, and every mayoral debate since 1989. And in all that time, I've known one unchanging truth. A black woman's dignity is always questioned before it is ever defended. She paused. Until now. Across the room, cameras clicked, pens stopped moving, and even Councilman Dewey, the one who never missed a chance to yawn during public comment, was sitting straight. I didn't ask to be a symbol, she continued, but I refused to be a footnote. Meanwhile, outside City Hall, a crowd had formed, not shouting, not chanting, but listening, through live streams, phones, loudspeakers. Grandmothers held toddlers. Teens balanced signs on skateboards. Local activists, reverends, barbers, teachers, they all leaned in. One sign read, "Power doesn't always speak loud. Sometimes it just won't move." And today, Evelyn Grant wasn't moving. Back inside, her testimony had shifted from personal to institutional. "I'm not here because of one officer," she said. "I'm here because of the system that told him it was okay. The training that skipped over humanity. The protocols that forgot how to read the room, or the people in it." She looked directly at the council. "You've had report after report, committee after committee, yet not one mandatory review for discretionary stops, no tracking of officer complaints filed by women of color, no mechanism for real-time accountability. I've done the homework. Have you?" Gasps whispered through the chamber. One councilwoman nodded. Another looked away. That evening, the speech went viral. Clips flooded Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. But the most shared post wasn't flashy. It was one photo. Evelyn Grant, standing calmly at the podium with a simple caption. She didn't need a microphone. She was the message. The post gained 2.3 million likes in 48 hours. Celebrities shared it. Activists reposted it. But what hit hardest was the flood of comments. "She reminds me of my grandma. Same eyes, same strength. This story broke me and built me again. We need to teach her name in civics class." Julian, meanwhile, was no longer just the state attorney. He was the son of that woman. And that title carried more political gravity than any election ever had. Networks called. D.C. called. A senator asked him to testify before Congress on racial profiling. But Julian didn't take the calls right away. He was in his mother's kitchen, helping her slice sweet potatoes. "They want you to speak next week," he said. Evelyn didn't look up. "Let them want. You're a national name now." "I was always Evelyn," she replied. "Now they're just paying attention." He smiled, but then his tone turned serious. "You changed everything, Mom." She paused mid-slice. "Not yet. But I opened the door. Now it's your job to make sure it doesn't close." The next morning, CPD released a statement. Short, stark, strategic. Officer Brenner has been placed on unpaid leave pending a full investigation. A third-party review board has been assigned. Effective immediately, a citywide audit on discretionary stops will begin. It sounded like accountability, but to Evelyn and to the city, it felt more like survival mode. That same day, Officer Brenner was spotted entering a law office downtown. His expression wasn't defiant. It was confused, as if he still didn't understand how a quiet black widow had become more powerful than his badge. Because he never saw her. Not as a citizen. Not as a mother. Not as Evelyn Grant. And that was the root of it all. Later that evening, at a Southside library, a special community forum was held. It was called What now? Hundreds packed the building. Teens with questions, elders with memories, mothers with fury. Evelyn sat quietly in the front row, just listening. And when a young girl, no older than 16, stood up and asked, "But what do we do when they still don't see us?" Evelyn rose, not to lecture, but to answer. You stop waiting to be seen. You build the room yourself. Applause followed, not the wild kind, but the firm, grounded kind. The kind that said, "We heard that. We're not forgetting it." That night, as the streetlights flickered on and the chill settled over Chicago, Evelyn took her usual walk through the park. No cameras, no crowd, just her thoughts, and a sense of something deeper than justice, momentum. When she passed a group of teenagers sitting near a bench, one of them stood and offered a nod. "Miss Grant," he said, voice low but clear, "we're with you." She smiled, softly but fully. "Good," she replied. "You're the ones I was doing it for." Because when the silence ends, it doesn't need noise. It just needs truth. And Evelyn Grant had spoken it, without permission, without apology, and with the kind of power they never saw coming. There are moments in life when history doesn't feel like a headline. It feels like breath. And on a crisp Sunday morning in Chicago's South Side, Evelyn Grant breathed deeply. The steps of City Hall were quiet now. The microphones were gone. The crowd dispersed. But the weight of her story, the impact of what had happened on that fog-covered street, on that night when she was handcuffed for simply driving while black, was still moving, still building, and most importantly, still working. 2 weeks after her testimony, the city's Civilian Review Board was restructured. For the first time, black women made up over half of its voting members. Evelyn was offered a seat. She declined. "Let someone younger take it," she said. "I'll be watching from the front row." Instead, she did something bolder. She created the Evelyn Grant Foundation, a grassroots initiative built not on charity, but on empowerment. It had no skyscraper office, no sleek branding, just one mission: to remind our communities that dignity is not negotiable, and legacy is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. The first project launched from the basement of a church, a legal literacy boot camp for seniors and teens. Volunteers showed up. Lawyers offered pro bono time. Local businesses donated supplies. By the second month, they had to move to a larger space. By the third, they were on NPR. And by the fourth, Evelyn Grant's face appeared on a mural in Bronzeville, painted not as a victim, but as a lighthouse. One afternoon, during a quiet lunch break at the foundation, a young woman knocked on the office door. She held a small notebook in trembling hands. "Miss Grant," she said, I'm writing my college essay about you." Evelyn blinked, surprised. "Why me?" "Because the day you spoke at that hearing, I realized I wasn't invisible. My mom cried watching it. My little brother started asking questions. And she hesitated. "I decided to apply to Howard." Evelyn didn't cry, but she smiled like someone whose hope had just been confirmed. She reached across the table and said, "Then let's write it together." Meanwhile, Officer Brenner had quietly resigned. No press conference, no camera crews, just a line in the city's official records. He was later seen applying for private security work out of state. What followed him wasn't Evelyn's vengeance. It was his own decisions. Because she never sought revenge, she sought reckoning. And reckoning, when done right, leaves room for growth, but not excuses. Julian, Evelyn's son, now a respected voice in state policy, continued pushing legislative reform. One of his bills, nicknamed Evelyn's Law, passed unanimously in the state Senate. It mandated body cam audits, stop and search transparency, and a three-strike accountability clause for officers flagged in multiple civil rights complaints. At the signing ceremony, he spoke only one sentence. "This isn't for the mother I love. This is for the system that thought she was disposable." The neighborhood Evelyn called home changed too. The same park where her arrest had taken place now bore a new name: Grant Grove. A bronze bench stood under an elm tree with a plaque that read, "She stood with grace." We stand because she did. Children now played in that space, unaware of what had once happened there. And maybe that was the point. Not to bury the pain, but to plant something better in its place. Years from now, Evelyn Grant won't just be remembered in court records or council minutes. She'll be remembered in the confidence of Black grandmothers at traffic stops, in the boldness of daughters who refuse to lower their gaze, and in the policies rewritten because one woman chose to say, "No more." She never asked for the moment to come, but when it did, she showed up for it. And in doing so, she gave the rest of us permission to show up too. Final reflection: the quiet force that changed everything. Evelyn Grant didn't set out to change a city. She didn't wake up the morning of that infamous traffic stop expecting confrontation, resistance, or transformation. All she wanted was to drive home after honoring her late husband's memory, to return to the quiet dignity of a life built on service, strength, and grace. But when the flashing lights appeared behind her, what began as a routine drive became a catalyst for justice. What followed wasn't just about one night or one officer. It became a story about how racism operates in silence, in posture, in the subtle assumption that some people are less worthy of respect than others. But more importantly, it became a story about what happens when that silence is broken. Not with anger, but with purpose. Evelyn's refusal to shrink in the face of injustice didn't just echo through City Hall hearings. It rippled into policy reform, empowered young voices, reshaped community trust, and inspired a generation to believe that dignity is not conditional. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She stood. And by standing, she reminded all of us, especially those watching from the sidelines, that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a black widow in her Sunday dress, calmly demanding to be seen. So what can we take from Evelyn's journey? First, that silence is not always peace. Sometimes, silence is the mask that injustice wears until someone brave enough tears it off. Second, that courage doesn't need a podium. It can begin on a street corner, in a courtroom, at a dinner table. It can sound like a grandmother saying, "That's enough." And finally, Evelyn's story reminds us that legacy isn't measured by titles or wealth. It's measured by the change we leave behind. You don't have to be famous to be powerful. You don't have to be in office to lead. You just have to show up for yourself, your community, your truth. If this story moved you, if it stirred something in your heart or reminded you of someone who deserves to be heard, don't let it stop here. Like this video, share it with someone who still believes in justice, and hit that subscribe button to keep these stories alive. Because this channel isn't just about content, it's about connection. It's about honoring voices too often ignored and reminding each other that we are not alone in this fight. Tell us in the comments, which part of Evelyn's story stayed with you the most? And where in the world are you tuning in from? We want to know. We want to hear your voice. Let's build this community together. Because real change starts with listening. And it continues with stories like these. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.